Now, let's touch on it, Bert. Of course, it's been pretty big news over the last few weeks, especially the last 6 or 7 days. So much talk at present around the Immortals again and who's going to be the next inducted. Your name again is front and centre.
As it should be.
As it should be. But how appreciative are you? Because it's hard for you to talk about yourself, isn't it? Sportsmen and women, it's hard for them to talk about themselves and promote themselves. But how appreciative are you that there's so many in your corner that think you should be there?
Oh, yeah, mate. I've often, you often think of when it all comes out, people are talking about it all the time, as you say, and I often think, geez, if ever I do become an immortal, the first thing I'm going to have to do is thank everyone on Facebook. It just seems to be on Facebook. Everyone say, yeah, he should be an immortal. Now I see Ron Coote, and I think, well, I can't disagree with that. I guess, yeah, it's nice to have people think that you're at that level and you've done enough in the game to warrant being classed as an immortal. I know people bring up the fact that, as we mentioned a little earlier, that I replaced Wally Lewis in the Test matches in England, and he's an immortal. So, and then also Mal Meninga in '86. I played in the centres and with Gene Miles. So there's an argument there, but look, it's obviously good to have people mention you about it. Being an immortal, I don't know, it may happen. I honestly believe that they should have done it in decades, say 60s to 70s, and team players that played in that era, pick 4 of them, and then 70s to 80s, and done it that way. There's probably a lot more players that I think, warrant being an immortal that probably will never get mentioned. So, and the players that played years before me. But yeah, as I said, it's always a great honour to think that people think you've done enough in the game to warrant being at least mentioned.
I like that.
Being immortal.
I like that system.
Well, I said that last night, Sats. I mean, we need to. It's just we're not going to get it right until we do it in blocks. Like it's like this period. Like it just becomes too convoluted.
Yeah.
And like someone like Brett Kenny, who should have been an immortal years ago, now we're questioning it. Like you look at the resume, like it's a given.
So, Bert, can I ask you this? Is it important to you to be named an immortal?
Oh, mate, sometimes I think, it'd be nice to do it. And then I think, well, what is it going to make any difference to my life? You think, well, is it something that you go, well, geez, if I become an immortal, this will happen and that'll happen and that'll be good? Or I guess you just don't know. I mean, people will always have their opinions, and if it comes out that I don't get it, or say Ron Coote, who everyone's talking about at the moment, if he doesn't get it, but there'll still be people who will say, in our eyes, he's an immortal. So yeah, I guess I often wonder, if I did become an immortal, would my life change, and if it did, how will it change? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I guess I won't really know the answer to that until they name the next immortals.
Well, you mentioned Ron Coote. Like Coote, I think he's a victim of John Raper being in the same era and exactly the same position as well. Now, do you think maybe that you've been a victim of the same scenario, that Wally's the same position, the same era?
Oh, look, I'm sure there's a lot of players that have gone through the same situation, playing in certain areas where there's been so many great players and they've only picked 1 or 2 from that era and then moved on. And you think, well, I mean, I always argue the point. If people say, oh, that was the best era, people say, oh, the 80s was the best era of the game. And I think at one stage they were talking about you can only have 1 or 2 players out of each era. And I'm thinking, well, why?
Yeah.
If the 80s was regarded as the best, obviously got a lot of quality players. How come you can only pick 2? Why not just pick the best that you think they are and put them in if they're worthy of doing it? And I just think that that's what's happened to a lot of players, a lot of former players, was that the era that they'd come in was so good. There were so many quality players, but they didn't want to put too many from that era in, maybe being frightened of people saying they've been biased or whatever. But I just think that if that was an era where they had so many quality footballers and they deserved, we'll put them in.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that.
Do that, and there's a lot of guys. I look at a guy by the name of John Sattler. I used to love watching him as a kid, and I often think, how come he wasn't named? Why wasn't he put in? And he's probably because he's come through that era where there were so many quality players, and he picked one or two.
Yeah,
it just makes it hard. I don't know how else they're going to be able to do it, but I've always thought that if they did it in decades or whatever, and maybe pick 4, maybe more. I don't know, but there's definitely going to be a lot of players that will miss out that people will argue should have been in Immortal.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, let me tell you, Bert, I think your life would change, and I think it'd be for the better because you'd be honoured for what you've done for the game, and not just for the game, but around the game too. I know we've talked about this before, but I met you when I was about 5 years old. You were my hero.
Yeah, so can you tell the story to the listeners?
So yeah, and we talked about this, Bert, at the 2016 Grand Final lunch. Do you remember when I fronted you at the side of the stage? And I said, I remember I spoke to you, and then you said to me what you said to me back then, and I was like, you said to me, I could, do you want to do this like your dad, mate? And I'm like, yep. And you're like, you can do it, mate. Just keep training hard, and I was just in awe of you, and you didn't need to do that. You were, just being nice to a little kid, and it inspired me. And you weren't just great on the field; you're great off it. And when you get honoured for that sort of stuff, like becoming an immortal, it's not just it will change your life. It'll make you feel amazing. But all those people that have supported you along the way, they ride that wave with you. I know, our listeners like Steve from Dubbo, who's the biggest Parramatta fan, and
Parramatta.
Oh, mate, they love you, and they ride that wave, and I think you deserve it. So, if I had a vote, mate, you'd be getting mine. That's for sure.
I'm signing the petition.
Yeah, we're on.
Now, Bert.
Yeah. Oh, mate, look, I just think it was that time that, when I was playing, that's what everyone was like. All the players were the same. You might have had one or two that wouldn't talk to a lot of people, but I think you'll find majority of the guys that played during those times were always happy to talk to people and young kids in particular. And, I know I used to have people come up and say to me, I didn't think we could talk to you guys, and we'd say, well, why? We're no different to you. We just play rugby league, I used to say to them, there's a guy down the road, the doctor, he saves lives. We just run around chasing a bit of pigskin.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what,
we're
Bert.
no different to you,
Yeah, I'll tell you what, mate. You spoke to me, but I was such a one-eyed Parramatta fan. I'd sit in the dugout, particularly like when Cronulla was playing Parramatta, I'd cheer for Parramatta. And my old man clipped me one day. None of the Cronulla players had talked to me because I kept cheering for Parramatta. I kept cheering for you, Bert, rather than Cronulla. I had my Cronulla kit on, but I was cheering for Parramatta. So
I think there was a few back then.
Didn't go down that well, mate. Yeah. Didn't go down that well.
Yeah.
He was a good man, your dad. He looked after me over in England in '82 and sort of took me under his wing a bit. And I learned a lot, and he was always good to me. And as I said, he was one of my idols as a young bloke, and it was such a privilege to be able to, first of all, play against him and then play alongside him. It was great, and I was able to do the same with Mick Cronin. So I was very fortunate. A lot of people have their idols in sports and that, but just don't have the opportunity to either meet them or play with them, and I was able to do that.
Steve Rogers and Bert Kenny, poetry in motion. Hey, Bert, we could sit here and talk about your career for hours, and we want to thank you very much for taking time out to join us on Sports Day, because we've had a lot of fans that have been texting and wanting to talk to you and want us to interview you. So we're so privileged to have you on the show, mate, and thank you very much for joining us on Sports Day.
Not a problem, boys. It was a pleasure.